Welcome to Agribusiness Matters. My name is Venki Ramachandran. Agribusiness Matters is an endeavor to discover systems thinking in an age of runaway climate change. Today, I'm really excited to have Sumit Saran. If you've entered any Indian supermarket, whether it's Washington apples or pears or prunes or pistachios, you would see a lot of international brands making inroads over the last 2 decades. If sometime back we covered the avocado market and how it has made deep inroads in Indian markets, and I'm really excited to talk with one of the brains who has been responsible for the last 2 decades to bring several international food brands to the Indian market. Thank you, Sumit Saran, for joining us in Agribusiness Matters.
Thank you, Venki. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So, Sumit, you started your journey in 1995. One of the reasons I do this podcast series and as a part of Agribusiness Matters Leaders Profiling series is to also to look at how the sector per se, which has largely been very less documented, compared to its global peers, and how the sector has evolved over time. So can you maybe take us back to your earlier start of your journey when in 1995, when you set up the Agribusiness Information Center in FICCI?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me and calling me a leader. I think one of the big issues that I have with this industry is that we have far too many leaders and less learners. So I don't think I qualify as a leader. Agribusiness is something, it's a huge space, and the more we learn, the better we get. So I started my journey right out of college. I had no idea ever that I'll be working in food. I was doing international relations in Delhi, and for some reason I picked up international food as my dissertation paper. And from there on, I got recruited by FICCI. FICCI at that time was at cutting edge. It was the Chamber of Commerce, but it was cutting edge on technology. This is pre-Google, pre-internet era. So they had a service called BizNet, which was called the Business Information Network Service, which was a Unix-led service, and we used to dial through the modem, etc. In that, within 1 year of joining FICCI and working with BizNet on the international side of business, got a project from USAID, and that project was on providing agri information to stakeholders in India. Now, these are days where it worked on fax and telex and those kind of technologies. But real-time, for example, pricing or real-time information on so many other things. So we set up under that USAID project in FICCI. I think it was not just India, I think it was Asia's first agri information center. They actually, we got this project going. They sent me to the US for a special training on information management, which was part at a consulting firm in DC, part at the Wharton Business School. And there on the whole thing shaped up under that USAID project. And went on we did some phenomenal work in terms of getting information from across the country and assimilating it into a newsletter, into online services, etc. And then when the internet boom happened, 97, 98 was when VSNL finally launched the internet services, the AIC or what we call it. It became a profit center on its own, and we ran it. I ran it till 2000. 99, 2000 was a time I remember was that there. I'll never forget, there was a Economic Times headline which said "Khao Pio IPO." So anybody who had an Excel sheet had a business plan. So we also had a business plan. I was very closely involved with the School of Agriculture at the IIM Ahmedabad. So 3 or 4 of us from IIM Ahmedabad, the group, we made something called AgriWatch, which was very similar, but more in depth. So I joined the AgriWatch team. I was one of the founders for agriwatch.com.
Sunil Kernar is also had started in the part of that, no? Sunil Kernar is also
Sunil Kernar, me, Girish Batra, We were the original three people who started
Okay, Sunil
Agribusiness.
Kannar is a part of Agribusiness Matters community.
Kya baat hai. So Sunil and I go back in that era.
I see.
So
Interesting.
we had this Agri Watch going for some time, and then under the US, because of my connections with the USAID project and the US work, I joined a company in 2000, 2001. This was the time when India was opening up. The first products to get onto an OGL, which is the Open General License. Before that, it was all licensed. Any import was licensed. Food primarily was closed. There was no imports of food legally allowed. You would have still some small markets here and there selling illegally imported some products, some chocolates here and there. But legally, food imports were not allowed. And
I see.
99, 2000 is when India opened up food imports and brought them under OGL. And I had joined a company by then, which we were doing some warehouse management in the US. That company was doing warehouse management, cold store, and that kind of more on the IT side of things, because my big background had become more IT for agribusinesses. So we were doing that warehouse management and taking the warehouses used to store California grapes. And when the market opened, the warehouse guys said that so many people because of your contacts in FICCI and all that. Will you launch California grapes for us in India? We said, yes, we'll launch it. And who knew those red globe grapes when it came to India for the first time? And it's been fire since then. I mean, one product after the other. And India kept accepting. So from that California grape, then came Washington apples, then came USA pears, then came California prunes, then came California pistachios, then came California walnuts. We worked on a project in Turkey for Turkish hazelnuts. We launched olive oil in India. When we represented a body called International Olive Council. And when I launched olive oil in 2006-07, extra virgin olive oil was considered a baby massage oil. Nobody knew, or not, nobody is not a right word, but most people didn't know that you can eat extra virgin olive oil. They used to think that it is only for baby massage. So from there, that olive oil story started. And then this went on till 2011, 12. We were representing a brand called Sunkist, which is one of the largest citrus brand in India. And the Sunkist brand wanted to set up a joint venture in India for local production. And that's how I got close to Future Group, which was at that time India's largest retail. And we were doing this joint venture where Sunkist joined hands with a company called Future Consumer Enterprise Limited, FCEL, one of the arms of Future Group. And in that period of that joint venture and transition, I actually got very close to Kishore Mr. Biyani at Future Group. And he asked one day that the consulting that you are doing, why don't you come and implement it? Rather than only giving knowledge about imported foods, why don't you bring the imported fruits and sell it? I said, okay. And then he said, join us. And when KB says join us, then you join. And so I joined Future Group as head of international foods in 2012-13. And for 5 years, I worked with Future Group as a retailer. My role was actually horizontal in Future Group. Typically, the retail industry and the professionals here are shaped vertically, like somebody handles fresh, somebody handles dried. I was horizontal. Anything imported, I was handling. And so we handled and launched some phenomenal products, both in the dry fruit category. We did some phenomenal products in the fresh category. We did some major joint ventures. There was a joint venture between Fonterra and Future Group, and there was a lot of work that actually happened in that. That 5 years have been one of my most rewarding and learning. To be also working with a leader like Mr. Biyani was phenomenal. The kind of learning that and getting a chance to work closely with him to understand what scale means. And then 2017, 18, there were some issues with the company that was working with Washington Apples here. And so Washington Apple actually reached out and said that, would you want to reconsider something like this? And I submitted a proposal and it just came through. So I actually went back to Mr. Biyani to say that this is what I have been doing and it's a very powerful relationship. Can I go back? And he supported. He said yes. So for 6 months, I was actually consulting with Future Group and starting this SS Associates business. We started representing Washington Apples back again. Then we started representing USA Pears. Then we started representing American pistachio growers, which is California Pistachios. Then we started representing US cranberries. Then we started also doing some work outside of the US. I launched kiwi fruit in India as the Chile kiwi fruit came from Chile that we launched. Then we launched Chilean cherries. We launched Northwest cherries from the US. And the last two of my latest projects is we are launching we are in the process of launching a nut called pecan. Beautiful nut, not a lot of Indians know. But I see pecans where cranberries was 5 years ago. And so next 5 years, I'll see pecans. And then we represented the World Avocado Organization. Avocado is another one which will be huge in India. And that's how I got close to Westphalia and those folks at avocado. That's the kind of gambit, it's not a traditional career path, but something that I feel very happy about.
No, it's very fascinating to hear your story, sir, because at one level, it's an indicator of how largely people who come into tech move into the core side of business and get to reimagine the market in a way. And that's what happened with me and with many people who entered the space in the agri-tech space and now are also looking at. So I'm looking at this conversation also as an opportunity for a lot of people who are listening to this as ways for them to also seek inspiration. So I want to go back to the earlier point that you mentioned, right? Today, when we go to our Indian supermarket, any supermarket here, the global products are a fairly obvious, in terms of for people with a higher purchasing power, right? But can you go back to that period when food imports was not allowed and you talked about the shift to OGL? How did the transition happen? Could you delve a little bit in terms of what were the roadblocks and how did that shift really happen? Because today I don't think many of us really know that kind of transition, how that happened, and perhaps that has some lessons for us who are now looking at newer opportunities in this space.
So, in a lot of ways, India was like a vacuum in food. There was more demand that India could fulfill. So whatever was produced at whatever quality was sold quite quickly. I mean, in one of my presentations, when we would say, and I would take a lot of pride and say, the 12th largest market in the world, the 12th largest food market in the world. Till somebody actually in the US pointed out how at that time India was the second largest. So how can the second largest population be the 12th largest consumer of food? It really struck a chord. I mean, think about it. And that when it came out, it really meant that it was a starved economy. It was an economy which was very inward looking. I mean, we of course have to be very proud of what our farmers did and what our agriculture has achieved and the Green Revolution and all that went with it. But we also have to understand that the world also moved at that time. It was not just India moving. The world also moved at that time. And when we opened up, there was a lot of learnings that India could imbibe from the world. And that is something is very core to my thought process. That more we open, the better we get. The more we restrict, the lesser our growth chances are. And so from the closed, when you open up, things appear. For years, we've been hearing that India has been the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables in the world. But it's also a matter of not just the production number. One, we were very distant on fruit and vegetable from the number ones. One. Second is the quality, the packaging, the post-harvest, the yields, the return to the farmers has been abysmal. So it's not just about being the second largest in the world. What do we do with that, and how we bring back economy of scale and revenue that goes through the channel to the last in the chain is something where there is a lot to learn from countries like Chile, countries like US, etc.
Yeah, and I think it's a good segue for me to also look into India as a market, right? For people who are in India, it's like much like fish in the water doesn't know that it is actually swimming in water. We don't get to see the market from an outside view, right? And I think that's where the penny drop moment you were talking about when somebody pointed at that to you, right? And in your presentations, in the earlier presentations, I saw that you've talked about it's one of the most complex markets. And while we will come to your earlier point about opening up the market, but I also want to look at it from a slightly from an outsider lens, right? When you say that India as a market, in one of your presentations, I also saw that you use the word high threat factor. So when you look at India as a market, which is a complex and has a high threat factor, what is the first thing that strikes you about India as a market from an outsider's perspective?
I mean, India is the most beautiful market in the world. There is no two ways about it. And I've worked across many countries. There are no better markets for any product than India, because of the demographic, from the richest to the upper middle class, to the middle class, to the lower middle class, and to the poor. Whatever is your product, you will be able to sell it if you know where to position it. That's where the marketing challenge comes in. Is that say, for example, for my US cherries or Chilean cherries, the market is only maybe 50 million or 100 million at most. But for an apple, it becomes a 250 million market. For something more mainstream, for almonds, it becomes a 350, 400 million market. So you have to make sure what India you want to serve when you're looking at market space. And the other challenge is that this 350 million people is mixed in 1 billion more people who are not your market. And so how do you segment? How do you reach out to the consumers who matter? In your case, is we would all like our growth to be more inclusive and more people to be affordable. But till that happens, and it's a slow process, it doesn't happen overnight in anywhere in the world. And it will take its time in India as well. But in that space, how do you cater to the consumer that you should be looking at is where the real wins are. That's where we specialize. Because when you see from an outsider lens, you read on Google and you see 1.4 billion population, and then you land in Bombay and all you see is slums. The real India actually lives in between. And so you have to do a lot of homework in figuring out what India you want to reach out to and how would you reach out to. And there are no thumb rules. You may succeed, you may fail, but if you are failing, it's not because of the market. If it's you failing because of your strategy. Because if your strategy is correct, India is a market for everything that you can think of.
It's very interesting. I mean, I want to also delve into your previous point about opening up the market, right? Because in a way, for a lot of us, when we looked at what happened in COVID, right, was a classic instance of seeing the coming to a full circle in terms of what happens when we have more integrated supply chains, right? Until for a long period of time, we all believed in the straightforward globalization narrative of bringing more efficiency in supply chains. But we then saw what happened when that exposed the supply chains to a lot of vulnerability. Right. Today, we look at that now, especially post-pandemic, the understanding of risk and vulnerability has dramatically changed. Right. So in that case, how do you see this market is now evolving? Like I was telling you earlier, I had a chat with Ajay from Westphalia, and we had a long chat about geographical adjacencies, right? That you can't just look at one market per se if you're looking at sourcing. You have to look at multiple market and adjacencies when you are planning your sourcing strategies. So can you look at how do you see this evolution, and let's say for a new product that you are bringing into a market right now in the post-COVID reality, how has your approach changed?
I would say three things post-COVID. One, it was a like a life-changing period for every businesses. I actually thank whosoever, I mean, the God and the Almighty, that we all work in food. Come what may, people have to eat 3 meals a day. 1.4 billion people need to be fed 3 meals a day. So this is one industry that we were very lucky that we were in a space that, come what may, that space will exist and will grow. Second, I think the food operators, the small retailer on the road, the small neighborhood shop, did not get the recognition that they deserved. And this is something which is very close to my heart, and something that if this podcast reaches to those who are at the hem of affairs in the government, etc., I don't think they were any less than the real warriors. I mean, call our country backward, poor, third world, whatever you want, but you would have never heard one case of a store being looted in India. For somehow 1.4 billion Indians were given their fruit, vegetable, rice, atta, home delivered in those pandemic years. And these guys, the kind of changes and kind of perseverance that I saw in the food industry, that's a reflection of what India can achieve if we are up to it. And thankfully, in the food industry, the opportunity always exists. And the third very important point I'm saying is, and I saw as a retailer, in general, the food industry grows 3-4% higher than the GDP. So even in a bad year, we are still an industry that will grow. So if the GDP is going at 5.5%, 4.5%, 5%, 6%, food will grow at 10%. So even on a bad day, you are at an industry which is growing at 10%. And if the India story grows to whatever that we are all aspiring for, you can imagine the growth, the exponential growth that will come. So COVID taught us a lot of things. The most important it taught us is the business opportunity that exists for the food industry. Second is the perseverance. Once you get out, you get it. And the third is, now we are seeing the results of it, is a very conscious shift of the Indian consumer towards healthy eating. It's a phenomenal shift. And I mean, just look at, I don't think international communities, international people at a lot of times are able to figure their thoughts around what a 1.4 billion means. I mean, if 1% of India shifts, if 1% of India wants blueberries, you're talking in Australia wanting blueberries. That's the kind of numbers we are looking at. So, I mean, these are still very nascent baby steps in international foods. Sky is the limit.
Yeah, I mean, it's very fascinating, right? At one level, we are talking about I mean, I really like what your point that you're mentioning in terms of how the resilience has been at a ground level, right? And I think that's another area where I want to also look at this question of how do we how do you look at the local resilience versus international connectedness, right? Like today, when you're talking about let's say in each of bringing the products, like say from pears to prunes to Washington apples, there are a lot of international cooperative groups that represent, and you as your firm as an entity collaborates with them, right? If I were to flip this side and then look at what are some of the Indian products that have that potential for global markets, right? How do you see that working in tandem, right? Today, because from like Purandar Highlands as an interesting example, where the figs from the region of Purandar in the Baramati regions are now being exported to EU markets. So if I were to look at let's say 5 years from now or 10 years from now, how do you see those kind of cooperative groups, associations being formed here? Or what is the way where we can also look at the flip side of what you're pointing out in terms of Indian products that have great export potential and are being able to crack the global market and present themselves in something like Fruit Logistica and those global forums?
No, it's actually it's a very good point that you raised. It's something again very close to my heart. I have tried to make my presentations in places like APEDA, etc. I hope those who take these decisions look at these models. The cooperative models that countries like US have makes huge dent. And these are big, and the thing is, it's funded by the growers. So the growers put in that money, but it's a disciplined investment. And then, most importantly, and not to pat my back, but I think most importantly, they hire local resource to promote international foods. And that's a very major missing link in India. You can take a celebrity from here and you fly them to Dubai or you fly them to London. One day at Marks and Spencer in London, you make a big show and promote Indian grapes. But then what? Today, Sanjeev Kapoor, the chef Sanjeev Kapoor, was a brand ambassador for Washington apples. Talking about Washington apples to Indians in Hindi in India. Now, who's talking, which Brit is talking about Indian grapes to Britishes in UK? That's where the missing link is. Its promotions cannot be trade shows. Trade show can be a part of a promotion program, but your promotion cannot be a trade show promotion. A promotion cannot be a flash in the pan. A promotion cannot be you go and light a big firecracker and then you vanish. That does not is not the right model. Promotion is where you have organized bodies that work with the stakeholders through the thick and thin. And then the brand building happens. And these are, I'm talking about generic promotions. Everything that we do is generic. We are talking Washington apples. It's not a brand. What it says is apples out of the state of Washington in the US. And then there are several brands. It's like saying Mahabaleshwar strawberry or Ratnagiri Alfonso. But the growers here, the government bodies, bodies like APEDA, all need to get together and put their heads. And there are enough and more Sumit Sarans in the world. What I do here, there are many people who do this work for communities and products across the globe. And retailers are also global retailers are also very cognizant of these people. So there is no dearth of product. There is no dearth of wanting to do. But there is, like I said, there is a dearth of clear thought process and strategy as to how Indian products need to be promoted in international market. I have always said you need to be a dot to be successful. You need to be a dot on a buyer's calendar, which India is not currently. India is a trading. It's not an exporting country. India is a trading country, especially in the fruit and vegetable space. So you're not still a dot, maybe for a few products, maybe for grapes. currently we are a dot on the UK buying. So when the UK retailers looks at the period of February and March, he puts a dot on India, that this is where I'm going to get my grapes from. That dot, maybe we are a dot on Basmati in the US. We actually, as a firm, launched Indian Basmati in the US. So we are a few dots, but the diversity of India, the product basket that we have, the climatic variances that we have, we can create 30, 40 dots easily. But local bodies, governments, Ministry of Commerce, those people who matter need to have a strategic export promotion program, which takes into on-ground activation. It's not about one flash in the pan or one minister going from here and cutting a ribbon. It's about working on that Indian brand with retailers, with buyers, thick and thin, through and through the year.
No, maybe I would love to hear you get a little more specific on these aspects, right? Because I think there are also enough number of readers in the newsletter who are from these bodies. I'm curious, like, let's say if you were to distill down to 5 specific pointers for, say, APEDA or anyone like today, because largely for products like, say, for the figs, right? I mean, I'm taking the fig as example because something fresh in my mind. Figs has a certain company, like I think the Agricos or another global firm, which has an Indian entity, and then they partner with them on a vertically integrated model, right? From seeds to export markets to making sure that they pass through the right global gap standards and all. So would you be able to probably distill down few recommendations that are very specifically to move each of these products, Indian products, from, let's say, from dots to make a bigger dent in the global markets?
So there are two things, Venki. One is what the companies are doing. That will keep happening. What the companies are doing, establishing supply chains, and that will keep happening, because one proactive company finds a proactive partner and he takes it. That I foresee more and more integrated businesses like that will set up. What I'm saying is something different. What I'm saying is brand India. What I'm saying is a generic promotion, either for a state or a region or a country. What needs to be promoted at a generic level, so that there are more companies, for example, on your figs, there are more companies setting up models for figs. So individually, companies can go to a certain extent, but companies will always be promoting their brand. Of course, there is an India angle to it and an India base to it. But like what we have done for teas, like Assam Tea now, or Darjeeling Tea, these are models that needs to be replicated. So first thought process change that needs to happen is the difference between a generic promotion versus a brand promotion. That's the first mindset thought process change that's required. So and once that happens, small victories lead to big opportunities. So pick up, like your fig, pick up a body, get a body together, or pick up a body for grapes, and it's again, like you mentioned, Fruit Logistica. Fruit Logistica is a trade show, so it's good to be there at Fruit Logistica. Of course, you should be there, but beyond that, once the product reaches the shelf of the retailer, and a customer in UK is at that shelf, what are we communicating to that? Is that difference? Companies will only go to a certain extent, but when we put generic power behind it, it takes it to a different scale.
No, it's very interesting, and I'm also keen to understand what are the implications of what you're saying, right? Like when we look at generic brands today, like for instance, we take the Araku coffee that has gone global, right? It is because also it is part of the Max Havelar's sustainable certification kind of bodies, right? I'm curious, in what ways do we need to reimagine? Because we've seen this in many cases in APEDA, where the global certification bodies have banned APEDAs from because of the certification process, right? From an infrastructure process, what do you think need to happen to make sure that these products, our Indian products, also live up to the global scrutiny and standards?
And so that global scrutiny has to be done in-house. And so, for example, when we give a Produce of India logo, there has to be a system behind it. So who gets that logo? I mean, the sanctity of the logo needs to be maintained. Today, when say a Washington Apple logo is put on a Washington Apple box, there are USDA grades and standards that box has to meet, and there are USDA inspectors at the facility inspecting. Only when the facility meets that grade can they use the Washington logo, and it's across. So, like again, I can tell you the missing link in India. A lot of times we focus a lot in the graphic designing of the logo, which is good. I'm not saying the graphic designing is not an important part, but the sanctity of the logo is a far bigger piece in my mind, and I sometimes feel we lack it, and it's not about it cannot be a one-sided approach. Bodies like APEDA, the exporters, all have to come together and agree. Unscrupulous trade always happens. For an unscrupulous buyer, there will be unscrupulous sellers. But when it is under a certain logo or at a certain certification, there are no two ways that we have to have processes and systems. And to give them all credit, it's there. The certification system that India has for its grape is one of the best in the world. I mean, there's no doubt. But are we communicating that to the customer who's buying in UK? That these grapes have met that conditions. Currently, what is happening, and the retailers also have their own conditions. Sometimes their conditions could be stringer than the conditions that the country puts. So the retailers make sure they communicate. But are we communicating? No. And that's where I think the missing link is.
No, it's very interesting because, I mean, I'm very glad to hear that grapes you consider is one of the best certifications in the world. And I want to go back to one of the point which I think Ajay mentioned in the last podcast. He talked about that in India we tend to create horizontal companies, right? Because we have a more diversity of supply chains and more diversity of players who are in the sourcing, right? And we've generally have 3-4 intermediary players in our supply chains, the kind of ways our systems are built so far. So do you think the way we are structuring our businesses is also coming as a hindrance per se? Like, for instance, if you were to replicate the success that you are talking about in grapes, what would be the nearest market potential from an Indian product that has that potential? And how do we need to structure it differently so that we can tap into, because today, even in the agri-tech space, I get this criticism a lot, right? Where most of us are either wanting to be traders, sourcing from different, from middlemen and other parts, and then supplying it in the external markets and benefiting from the arbitrage. But not many people are able to have the necessary wherewithal to go deeper and invest in becoming a vertical stack player. So how do you see that shift also happening in?
If you ask me, my thought is don't try to be too many things to too many people. Businesses will run on their own. I mean, you cannot control what a business wants to do. They want to grow vertically, horizontally, tangentially. That's their business. They'll grow. The model that I'm thinking for India and the model that I've worked internationally here in India is you concentrate on creating brand India. Businesses will figure out their path to that goal. And that's where I said at the start, there are far too many leaders, there are far too many thoughts. We are not open eyes and open hearts are two different things. So it's not about just opening our eyes, but also about opening our hearts. realize, and having worked, Venki, having worked with farmers across the world, I've never seen one farmer wish ill for other. I've never seen a farmer in India or a farmer in the US or in Chile or Peru who say that I wish Indian apple season fails this year so that I can sell more apple. The world of food is beautifully interconnected, and I'm so happy to be and I feel honored and privileged that I have this opportunity to work in this area, because I mean, you can't be so proud of Indian grapes in UK or Indian basmati in the US, but have in your heart an internal hatred for American apples in India. World is not a one-way street, and the more one-way street we take, more chaotic it's going to get. So the moment we open our eyes and heart of what the world has achieved, what the world is going through, and India gets integrated into that supply mode, where the generic promotion is kept separate from the company promotions and company strategies. And I remembered one thing that Kishore Mr. Biyani used to say, and that's something stuck in my heart for years. He used to say, and I don't think it's his quote, but it's somebody's quote. I don't know whose quote is this, but he used to say that there are thousands of ways to move ahead, but there's only one way to stand still. So I guarantee you, if you launch a promotion campaign with a model, something may work, something might not work, but you will find your way. But if we keep sitting and discussing models on papers and on in meetings and in conferences, I guarantee you 1 year later we will meet and we will talking exact same thing. And this is the stagnation that I see sometimes, that what I've been seeing the India story from 2001 till 2023, the challenge remains the same. We are still cold chain deficient. We are still, the brand is missing. We are still have unscrupulous traders who are not meeting the quality standard. We still have international pressures. Well, world's moved on. We got to be part of that move on. Let people free. One thing I absolutely despise, and something that I can say with a lot of Indian farmer is not uneducated. Indian farmer is not somebody who needs your support. Let the farmer breathe. He or she will figure their way out. Don't put too many of these tangentials. Let the farmer be. Let the farmer produce to the best of his or her ability, and the businesses take it to the scale that it needs. That's where agri and business meets. That's what agribusiness is. But if the farmer starts to try to get into export promotion and the companies start to get into farming in the name of so-called integrated, then the whole thing collapses. So keep it simple. Keep it simple is a big mantra in this.
Yeah, and I think it's quite underrated. And today, especially when the boundaries are blurring, and I think you're pointing out to much fundamental elements of focusing on one's core business and core strengths. So
like the food processing story. I was many years ago, there was a report called FAIDA. I don't know if any of this new generation knows about this report. Food and Agriculture Integrated Development Approach. That was FAIDA. It was a report that came out in, I would think, 98, 99, around that time.
I'll look it up. Yeah.
It was a McKinsey study which termed and gave the word sunrise industry for food processing.
I see.
Somehow I feel the message of FAIDA has got very diluted in India. What the report had said is India wastes 30% of its production. So then they said, okay, we waste 30%, so we must process. And that's where I think a link broke. Because suddenly we were equating waste management to food processing. So because we waste, we must process is the basic edifice of food processing. Which means the bhaiya that gives you tomatoes for your home will go to the market at 5 in the morning. The guy who makes the sauce will go 5 in the evening and buy everything that has not been sold. Not realizing that bad tomatoes will not give you good ketchup. So the bigger thought of table varieties versus processable varieties needs to come in. And processing has to be an independent entity on its own. I process because there is this market for this processed food. I don't process because I need to prevent wastage. There are other ways to handle your wastage.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point that you're mentioning. At processing need not be a residue of what is the waste and can be a market on its own, right? Yeah.
Globally it is a market on its own. And that's something that we need to learn and we need to imbibe.
Phenomenal margins you can make. I mean, look at the margins, the amount of investments you do and the amount of returns you get is non-linear.
Yeah, but it cannot be a waste management solution. One, I don't think the FAIDA report initially had said, and I think that's where the message was also got diluted. What the report said was, when you waste what could have been sold for 100, now gets sold for 70. So it was 30% value loss. There is no gadha, no pit big enough to take 30% of India's production. So definitely India does not throw the production. As a retailer, when I was doing, we realized there was a wastage that was happening because of supply chains, because of moisture loss. So you buy one truck of tomato, which is X kilos. By the time it reaches warehouse, it is X minus 10%. So this is the moisture loss that has happened under the sun. So those kind of things. But this is a far deeper topic for you to talk to your experts. But having seen the world, I can guarantee you that food processing and waste management are not the same thing. And the quicker we imbibe this, both at the ministry level, at the policy level, at the company level, the better our results will be.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very fascinating topic. I have been talking to a few experts on these aspects per se, but I mean, in fact, yesterday's budget there was mentions about food processing in there. So we hope that some of these, we have in Telangana, we are setting up food processing parks. And we are also there are a lot of models now that are looking at sort of decentralized village entrepreneur food processing models. But I think it will really take time to build the necessary infrastructure to scale these endeavors at this point. Yeah.
Again, I'm saying, Venki, and at the cost of repeating myself, primarily because this is what I do. You concentrate, I'm talking from policy level and promotion level. You go concentrate and create a market buzz for Chittor Mango Pulp.
Okay.
The companies will figure out their way to get the mango pulp. You put a system in place which says that these are the quality parameters that the mango pulp has to adhere to. And then you go to Europe and say, in winters where there is no mango, here is a pulp which is certified. This is so good, so tasty from India, and work on a model. Let the companies, they'll figure out their way. I am a big believer in Indian entrepreneurship. I don't think any of us need to mess around. Let the companies be. They'll figure out their way to get the product across. Concentrate on the bigger picture, and let the everybody. I mean, one of the sayings is that when the water rises, all boats rise.
Yeah.
So you, as promotion bodies, your role is to. It's also about like the size of the pie versus the piece of the pie. And a lot of times we are caught in the piece of the pie. We need back-end support to increase the size of the pie. Once that happens, every piece will increase.
No, I think what you're making is a very interesting point in terms of decoupling the promotion of the brand, a promotion of a particular produce from, let's say, from a particular region, vis-a-vis from the companies that are involved in the production of it. And by keeping them two separate, you're saying the share of the pie and the pie also increases.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, maybe there's to start off with, initially the GI tag products is one way where we are starting to reclaim that space, right? Whether we talk about, a particular varieties from chilies or a particular varieties of products. There are a lot of GI tag products that are emerging in the market, which are attracting a lot of slightly better margins when it comes to international markets. So I suppose you are looking at that direction and doing something much more beyond that, right?
Again, I'm saying something separate. What I'm saying is we are winning the battle in the trade space. The GI tag has no meaning to the consumer space. Once I'm saying bridging this gap between the trade space and the consumer space. Once you let the consumer in your destination market know that Guntur chilies are the best chilies in the world, then that space is still untapped, untouched. So we may bring some margin enhancement because of the GI tag at the trade level. But beyond that is where the gap is. And that's where I think if a little effort is put, both margins and volumes will increase. And you'll see more companies coming in, more products coming in.
Great. I think this is very, very interesting conversation in terms of looking at some of these in local markets, and right now also the government is also looking at entrepreneurship as an engine of growth, right? So from that sense, I think there will be a lot of possibilities that are emerging. So one last question I want to explore also from a farmer's share of revenue, right? Today we look at these global markets and you look at the share of revenue, farmer's share of the pie. Right? It has largely been on a declining curve because there are, the processor or somebody who comes in who takes the produce, because farmers are not really, oftentimes doesn't have the infrastructure to take the bigger risk. And so they give it at a very low rate, and then the processor who comes in takes a larger share, right? Any ideas from your vantage point, given that, what you're saying in terms of how do we make this inclusive, in what ways can we increase the share per se, right? Right now we are trying to solve this problem is to set up cooperatives where the cooperative will own these infrastructure from a processing standpoint and also from a grading and sorting standpoint. Are there anything else you think that could be done so that the farmer's share also increases as we increase the pie and increase the share of the pie?
So I think the first is the farmers and their products needs a lot of work in India. If you look at it from a trade balance perspective, we import the most premium products from across the world, and we export the lowest edge products to the world. It should really be reverse. So you are importing almonds at 500 rupees kilo, and you are supplying some masala at 30 rupees a kilo. That's where the gap is. That's where farmers and entrepreneurs or agribusinesses need to get and change. Even a group of farmer changes. Even a group of farmer goes through a transition process. The community changes, and then one success leads to other. It cannot be a hands down driven. It's not an easy thing. It's not a short term thing. But we've seen examples in front of our eyes. I was involved in a PPP project in Future Group. We had signed a PPP with the government of Andhra Pradesh of supplying bananas out of one district in Anantapur. And suddenly we figured that the farmers were very willing. So you've seen the banana story now. That like the world is short on bananas. Ecuador would supply to the west. Philippines will supply to the east and south. India has to play a role in global banana. And now you are seeing the first signs of Indian bananas getting into UAE. I can almost foresee in 3-4 years you'll cross the seas and get into Europe. Now a banana story needs to be told to the world. Pomegranate, our Bhagwa variety. I've worked with pomegranate across many countries. Our Bhagwa variety is probably one of the best varieties in taste in terms of the aerial quality. But who knows? You and I talking and your listeners agreeing to this doesn't make a buyer in Netherlands go and ask for a Bhagwa variety. That's where the challenges remain. That's where, so at a farmer level, a lot of work needs to be done to get the farmer convinced on changing either the crop or the practices. So you just don't grow for yourself. You actually also grow for the world. And when you get companies through these buyback type arrangements under a cooperative or under PPP, things will change, and one success will lead to another. And again, I'm saying don't interfere too much with the farmer. Show the farmer one success model. The farmers will adapt. You don't have to handhold.
Great. I think, one of the reasons why I do this sort of agribusiness matters is largely to steer the community, because we don't have a community of just listeners here. We have a community of people who are agri-tech entrepreneurs, investors, people who are in the policy and other bodies. So I'm hoping that people who are listening to this also steer to action and look at the possibilities that are, the low-hanging fruits and the high-hanging fruits that are both literally and metaphorically that are in front of us. On that note, I think it was a fascinating conversation, Sumit. Thank you very, very much. I really enjoyed talking to you, and maybe I would love to again see if we can go down to maybe a specific topic also in detail and go a little more deeper into some of these aspects of how do we take the potential of the Indian markets to the to the global world and make the world also notice some of the Indian brands per se. Yeah.
Thank you. It's lovely talking to you. I really hope that this happens, and if you and I are part of that, it will be one of my very. It will be a dream come true moment for me. I've been saying this that Indian products in global markets promoted the way international foods are promoted in India is hope so. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we are doing the work. I mean, I'm doing my bit in that sense also in many ways in the work that I do.
We'll all keep
I'm very happy. We would love to see the results there. So thank you very, very much for speaking to us, and we're looking forward to staying connected. Thank you.
Yes, bye.